Hello and welcome to another Daily Muppet. It's been a while since the last one, and we have quite a bit to unpack in this latest video. There's a lot going on as we close in towards the end of the season. First talking about results, as I've mentioned in previous videos after the last Liverpool game and other things. The season's over. It's been over. Brentford was fine. I felt there was a ton of overreaction to the good performance because they were a team that let us have the ball. We played old, slow, technical players who did fine when a team let us have the ball and didn't play possession football. And obviously against Brighton, that same strategy did not work in the slightest. The biggest thing that I would say is, again, it shows the need for, the clearing out and the rebuilding. One of the things it also says, which we'll touch on in terms of transfer strategy, is no matter what center back you buy, they will fail without a proper defensive midfielder, defending structure, and effective fullbacks in defense and attack. I mean, both Lindelof and Varane looked terrible in conceding a few of the goals against Brighton. And so a lot of that came down to overloads against them from poor defending in the fullback area and no coverage from the midfield from Scott and Matic, who just not there. So there's no need to really go on too long about those because we know the issues. And as I've said, it's pretty much a wash. I'm not going to read into too much in terms of the personnel this year. We know who's gone. We know who's likely going. Let's see what happens with that. Talking about Rangnick, I put some tweets out on after the game on Saturday. And, that's one side of things, and it comes across very negative against Ralph. And again, it's just one side of the message. I've said before what I feel his role is at United. Some of the things that he's done, some of the things that he's said, some of the things that he's shown are good and are positive and are making a difference. I don't really rate him as a manager. I don't think I ever did. I think in the beginning we talked in the podcast about that he's not an experienced manager. He's not someone who's proven as a good football manager. That's not really his area of expertise, and I don't think he's done a good job, but it sort of doesn't matter. The season was a wash when they did not hire a permanent manager in November, following the sacking of Ollie, when they waited a bit too long to do it as well. Frankly, they might have been better off keeping... That's not the right thing to say. Again, the biggest thing is that, as we spoke about back then, one of the biggest problems that happened is all the coaches left as well. Things would be a bit better off if the coaches had stayed. Were the coaches good enough for the team to move forward and win at the next level? No, they would have been replaced by Ten Hag and his staff this summer. Would it be better to have had some continuity through the season? Absolutely. But that's what happened. Carrick left, McKenna left, Pert left, and Ralph was not left with a lot of options. So while he may not have had the best effect as a manager, a lot of things were out of his hand, and unfortunately just a bad situation overall. What is important, though, is Europa. It is important to secure it. It really is. It can make a big difference in terms of the targets we're chasing from a financial perspective as well. The loss of money from Europa down is significant. From Champions League to Europa, a lot of it is washed by the lower salaries, but from Europa down, it makes quite a difference on the overall strategy and potential budget. It also means fewer games, and that's where it can hurt in terms of a transfer strategy. If you have 60-odd games to play, and you have Cristiano Ronaldo, and you bring in a striker, there's plenty of games for everybody. If you have 30 or 40 games, there's not. And that's a good thing and a bad thing. It gives you less of a chance for the youth. It gives you less of a chance to try out players. And it gives you less game time to be offered to players who are being brought in where there are players in their position, and that can be a big deal. Following that, we'll talk about the targets in a moment, but, there's further restructuring today reported by Luckhurst. He has a whole story. Sweeping changes, what he said, not one small appointment. Andy Mitten alluded to this earlier, that Richard Arnold's looking to make his mark on the club. Samuel Lucker says that they are going to hire a football director, and I think we kind of know this, but this is if it's a big overhaul, with the scouts leaving, with all these people leaving, I still really hope it comes back to Mitchell. They haven't really brought his name up, obviously. They've really only talked about O'Boyle. I don't have anything new on this. So it's just one that we're just going to have to let play out and see what happens now. I hope it goes one way, different to the way that it's looking in the media, though I really know nothing about O'Boyle to say it'd be a bad candidate, just know nothing about him. So we'll see what happens there, but obviously there's, it's promising the way that it's stated as sweeping changes and, a huge, an overhaul of the, entire setup. I think that's a big deal overall. The other thing is, it's been reported today, Van der Gaag, they're closing in on confirming that. We know that we reported back when they confirmed Ten Hag that they had already agreed the compensation package for both of them. So it was just a matter of finalizing the contracts for Van der Gaag and probably waiting till the end of the season to kind of confirm that. So it's not as much a distraction on top of the Ten Hag situation. So let's move on to the transfer targets. And the first one we want to talk about is Darwin Nunez and the striker situation. I've been talking about this for months, and obviously it keeps coming up. He's the main name. Reports keep popping up out of Portugal. The last update we were told from one source is it's been communicated in talks, I believe, through Mendez, that he's happy with the personal terms on offer. They need to get going in negotiations with Benfica in earnest. There is a lot of competition for him. There are a lot of other clubs chasing. But I understand that he would be willing to join United, and even without Champions League at the moment, and that's kind of been addressed. The biggest thing, though, is that United, again, need to finalize their league position to know where they're going into next season for Europa or Conference or what, because it makes a difference to budget. It makes a difference to the targets, as I've mentioned, in terms of where they're playing. If it drops from Europa down to Conference or out of Europe, I think you're reopening those discussions in terms of what personal terms would take and what's on offer. I think it causes potentially some issues there, and that could even affect the situation of someone like Cristiano Ronaldo. So, they need to get that finished in order to press on with negotiations with Benfica. I believe, again, that the price would be somewhere more in the range of 60 million euros plus add-ons to get it done, probably 70 to 80 total for a deal like that. It was confirmed again as well today, Fabrizio Romano stating that Nunez is viewed as the perfect striker for United moving forward, and is, a top choice. He's not the only one, and that is true. It's mentioned, it's mentioned that, that there's other names. It's mentioned there's names like Nkunku, but of course, you have the president from Leipzig, or one of the main directors at Leipzig, saying he's not leaving this summer. And frankly, after the whole Sancho thing, it's sort of, I don't want to go into even discussing it when someone's publicly saying their player's not leaving from Germany and they're expensive and they're wanting to keep him another year. At this point, I'm just going to take them at their word for it. Again, we've talked about how maybe he's not even viewed as necessarily the striker. Richarlison, another name mentioned. I think that would be one we move to if we fail with Nunez, basically, to get a deal done. Nunez seems like the clear top target, and hopefully discussions with Benfica can move on. There's other names like Ekitiki that they inquired about, but I don't believe it's related. I think that's a secondary choice. Moving on to the midfield, it's a bit of a mess there. One thing is they're looking for two different kind of midfield profiles there. A defensive midfielder and a center midfielder. For a defensive midfielder, I think it's crazy how this is still messy and they still haven't sort of got this nailed down like they had last year, where we knew it was Sancho and we knew it was Varane or Pau Torres, and it was kind of all set up there. We've kind of got that with Nunez, even though it's definitely not as certain as Sancho was. But they still don't know. I think Phillips still seems like the one. It's going to be really difficult with Rice, as we know. Tchouaméni, United isn't even being mentioned around it because of all the interest in him from other big clubs that can offer a bit more right now. I know there's concerns with Phillips on his willingness to move, but Leeds are now very much in danger of relegation after this weekend's results. and I think that that helps the situation. And I think given the info that's out there, I'd be surprised if United hadn't already cleared this up as to whether he would be willing to move. There's a lot of indications from people that he would, and a lot that he wouldn't. So a little bit remains to be seen, but if he's going to be relegated, I don't know. I just don't think it's... I don't know that in modern football it's that certain. There's only one club that United don't do deals with, and that's Liverpool. And I don't think it's that certain that these things wouldn't happen, that they wouldn't go across. I think it's still the most likely defensive midfielder by far. For centre mid, they've been looking at different profiles, and this one's especially tricky. One thing I will say, and this is new news, from what I've heard very recently, Frankie de Jong has let United know he's not interested in joining. And that's that. He won't be joining. Milinkovic-Savic is a target, has been for ages as a Pogba replacement, but it's 65 million, and it's never been as advanced as all the news has tried to make it out, obviously. He's just been a list of targets. The main thing is United seem to be lining up targets for virtually every area. It doesn't mean they're going to move on that, but depending on how the budget stretches, depending on how things move, we go forward from there. For the center back and defensive positions, there's more confirmations that Pau Torres is a target, but again, 55-60 million euros release clause. It just doesn't make sense this summer without a significant departure, and unless United somehow stretch the budget from more urgent areas. I can't rule it out. If you've been following for a while, we've been talking about Pau Torres since like November 2020, maybe earlier, as a top center back target, someone that United love, that they've scouted a lot, that they've looked at a lot, that they've talked with before, that they nearly bought last year. So I can't rule it out. It makes a lot of sense to bring him in, but it makes a lot of sense if they're moving a significant departure on, not Bailly or Jones, but someone else. And then it would make a lot of sense. So it feels like it'd be hard for that to happen this summer, but it still could. It's been said as well, again, that the fullbacks is the main issue. And we'll talk about Timber. The situation with Timber is, again, to be clear on this, that it's someone that Ten Hag would like to bring. There's no significant discussions ongoing for it yet with Ajax or anything like that, but it is someone Ten Hag would like to bring. And I personally think that he'll get it, but it's going to be a bit of an odd one because... it's not like it's some advanced deal, but I think it makes so much more sense for coverage for center back, for coverage for fullback. He's a great, fantastic player. Probably Ajax's best player, or up there, in my opinion. From what I've watched, which is not a ton, but from what I've watched, I believe he has got to be up there among their best players. And so we'll see. I think that one makes a lot more sense this summer than Pau Torres. And that striker, Phillips... Nunez, Phillips, Timber, to me, seems like at this point in time the most likely outcome for this summer. And then the last major thing that I have is I spoke to somebody on, giving some info on, on Ten Hag side of things and what happens. I think there's a lot that has to still happen. It's still up in the air. There's been discussions. They need to get moving on some of the Ten Hag things. I think potentially, it's kind of wild, but that Darwin Nunez in the striker position is the most clear. But from Ten Hag's side, from what I understand, he's already said that Nunez would be one he'd be happy to sign as a Cavani replacement and, to bring in as a striker. From Ajax, he's interested in 4, from what I understand, for this year, or what he's looking at, or that he's asked United to look at. Timber we've talked about, but I don't know. Mazraoui, who's already agreed to Bayern, who makes a lot of sense. But again, if you think with the indications of Timber and Mazraoui, fullbacks, and you look at all the news recently about this fullback and that fullback coming from all over the place, that's agent talk, most of it, but it means United are looking. And a fullback does seem to be an area of concern, with Luke Shaw being the only one with a nailed down position, frankly. I do think Wan-Bissaka, as we've discussed in previous videos, gets a chance, as does Dalot, and the decisions will be made there, but fullback and right back seemingly is a priority. The other couple players that apparently Ten Hag has asked for United to just look at and check out are Martinez and Gravenberch. if the Bayern deal continues to stall, maybe United do look at Gravenberch again. I don't think he's the defensive midfielder solution, but as the second midfielder, I'd be interested in that one. United have been looking at him for many years, actually. The biggest problem was, and I mean this with no, not to speak ill of any, to speak ill of the dead, frankly, but it's a new regime at United, and the problems with Mino Raiola maybe are no longer there, simply for obvious reasons, with him no longer around, and perhaps a relationship can be repaired, and this interest could be revived from years past, and something could happen if Bayern cannot close this deal. So that's one I would not rule out as well. I think a lot is up in the air at the moment that is not fully defined as hard targets yet. Andy Mitten in his Q&A said the same thing, interestingly. And that doesn't mean that they're doing things badly this year. It may be that there's just less leaking going on and less briefing to media going on to make it quieter. But like last year, we knew pretty much exactly what was going to happen. And, and even though after the initial signings, things kind of went wacky, there was at least sort of a certainty. And, I mean, per our information, it doesn't seem that off, but it's certainly not quite as out there and confirmed as it usually is by this time of year. And maybe that's a good thing. Hopefully it's a good thing and not a bad thing, because, like I said, from what I understand and from what we've seen, Nunez, Timber, Phillips, these seem like the most likely and solid signings, but we'll see. I mean, it's hard to say, and not just because of, insider news or info or knowledge or all that, but so many changes. Changes in communications director, changes in scouts, changes in Matt Judge. This changes the whole flow of information, and it may even change decisions that are made. So we could be saying right now, look, these are the top three. You would hope this isn't how it goes, but in a month, maybe they're totally different. Regardless, as soon as the league position is secured and the window's kind of opening for us before preseason, I think it'll be a lot clearer exactly what United are doing and easy to tell what's going on. So that's it for now. I'll keep you updated on the latest that comes up, as I'm sure we'll be getting a lot of news soon. In the meantime, make sure to like, follow, subscribe, listen to the last podcast. Went into a lot of detail on things. Turn notifications on, and I'll see you in the next video.